Hey, good afternoon. My name is Roger Williams. Native name is Giwse'inini, which is the deer hunter. And we'll talk about that down the line. Well, first of all, I'd like to tell you I come from the Williams family, from Rudy and Lily, and I had six brothers and two sisters. And I want to talk about when I was growing up hunting and fishing. So, I did a lot of hunting when I was about 7, 8, 9 years old, and I never got to carry a gun or use a rifle or anything. But my brothers, I went with them all the time, and they taught me all the safety of carrying a rifle and where it should be pointed, and so no one ever got hurt. That's not what your guns are for. They're for hunting and surviving. And, so all those messages they sent me and the rules about safety stuck with me ever since I was a kid. That was a long time ago. Right now, I'm at the age of 76, and I enjoyed my life, my family, and all the grandchildren we have. So we're getting along pretty good with it. And what else? There was the safety of firearms and mostly hunting and carrying a rifle in general. How you take care of you and your hunting partner, ever who you're hunting with. Usually we try to hunt with 2 or 3 people at once, and just separate it a little bit. One guy in the center, and one guy on the right side, and another guy on the left side, and that's why the center guy would chase up the game, and the ones on the outer side would get a shot at the rabbits, which we were hunting at this time. And I did fire guns with my brother's guns, but I never owned one until my 10th birthday. Actually, it was Christmas time. My dad got me one, a single shot Cooey, and it had just one bullet. That's all you could load the gun with. It wasn't no semi-automatic or repeater or nothing. It was one shot. That's what you had. And that taught me a lot. Because after you have that one shot, you have no more until you load it again. So when you wanted to take that one shot that was rabbit running away slow like that, you could pick him up in your sights on the rifle. You just follow him, and you don't have to aim in front of him if he's going slow. You take your shot, and after a while you get pretty good. You can hit them on the run. We used to do it all the time. My brothers were really good at that. But I followed in their footsteps. I became a pretty good shot myself. And my first hunt wasn't with my older brother, Rudy Jr. We called him Snuff. He was a good hunter, and lots of people liked hunting with him. Like, he knew where the rabbits were, and he'd tell you which way the rabbit would be facing before you ever seen one. You used to tell by the wind, because they would face the wind. In case there's any predators coming, like foxes and wolves, coyotes, whatnot. And the rabbit would know. He'd smell that animal coming after him. And he'd always face that way and get a scent of that critter that was looking for him. So that's how he knew. That's how he taught me which way that rabbit would be facing. And we used to shake the brush piles, and they'd run out. And I think one hunter had a shotgun. We other two had rifles, 22 rifles. Let's see, where am I? Oh, yes, and after that, we were back there. I was about 10 years old when I got my first gun. So we hunted all around back there. We're on South Vital Street, about midway between Churchill and LaSalle line. That's where I grew up. That's where our family lived. And until we moved downriver. My dad built a house downriver next to Noble and the Maben family. And the Adamses, they were on our left side. So we hunted down there, and my sister lives down there now. She built a house on that same piece of property, and I remember the first hunt I went with my gun, me and my brother, and I think I shot a rabbit because it stopped and it was just sitting there trying to standing up on its hind legs and looking around. See, we were chasing it, but we didn't chase it. We just let it stop, and I got a good shot at him. So that was the only rabbit I shot that day. I think Snuff, my brother, got shot 2 of them. And so we hunted the next day to make sure we have enough for a meal. It would take 5 or 6 rabbits for us to have a meal, like the size of our family. And yeah, we did quite a bit of hunting that winter, and got more aggressive and more strength in your legs from walking and sensing out where the bush was, where the rabbits hung out. They like to eat different stuff, Like they ate a lot of sumac, the bark off the sumac, and any fruit tree they would find, they would take all the bark off the bottom, and sometimes the tree would die, But if it was just a young tree, but those big tough ones, they would survive, And or they'd go in a rabbit hole, so we just have to leave them and hope next day or next week they'd be out and we could roast them up. And what rabbits we got extra, like we didn't eat rabbit every day, we saved some up, and we used to clean them as soon as we got home, because that's the best time to clean them, because some are still warm and the fur just pulls right off. My brother used to clean them in 2 or 3 minutes, one rabbit. Take the fur off it, the hide, and take the inners out, and cut the feet. We had to leave the feet on them. We were going to sell them, because they wouldn't bite them if there was no feet on them. They wouldn't know if it was a rabbit or a cat. So they're about the same size. So no, leave the feet on them, boys. Okay. So my dad used to take them to the river, across the river when he used to work over there in the wintertime, summertime. Not summertime, but in the wintertime. So I'd get, I don't know, in a week, and that's for snaring rabbits too. We used to collect them on snares, and at the end of the week, or Sunday night, I'd have about, I don't know, maybe 4 rabbits or 5. But that was $5. That was a lot of money. We used to sell them for $1 each. My brothers would have 10 or 12 each, and and sometimes they got lazy to clean the rabbit, and they would give me 15 cents to clean every rabbit I cleaned for them. So that added up too, Sometimes I'd clean 10 extra rabbits, so that would be another $1.50 for me. And that I'd get Dad to bring me a box of bullets and, or some comic books, and that was our spending money. So we always try to make a little bit of our own spending money, And next thing for us to hunt was fish. We used to wait for the first big thunderstorm in the spring, probably at the end of April, right about this time. And once that creek starts to flood, that's when the fish would know when they hear that thunder, and it was time for them to swim upstream, because the creek would be full. It would only, be full for a day or two, and it would go down, recede, and flow back out into the river. But in the meantime, they never laid their eggs yet, So they went up to lay their eggs, and other males, they followed them up these small ditches that came off the creek. And so we knew where they would hang out up those ditches, and where it gets kind of deep, and you can see them, especially on a sunny day, you can see them swimming there, just sitting there, just floating along. And shaking their fins and stuff. Eh? So after we would get a nice, about 4 or 5 pike, 2 feet long or so, and then we'd clean them all up for our dinner the next day. Eh? So we'd have lots of fish. Only thing about eating pike here, lots of bones in them. Eh? You gotta be careful. So I used up, all I ate was just a fork and my fingers. And I knew where all the bones were in there. You just run your finger along, you can feel them. Eh? And you just pried them up with a fork and pulled the meat off the frame of the fish, the skeleton like. So that's how we learned how to eat fish.
Pike just in the creek?
Yeah, just from in the creek. And
Telford Creek?
Yep, Telford Creek. And we had 2 good feeds or 3, and then our neighbor down the road, there was an elderly gentleman, him and Matt the Maven and his wife Annie, they lived down there where the old Indian dump used to be, right on top of that hill, like where there's pear trees and apple trees there. And he'd be down there standing in the creek, about a foot of water or so, 16 inches, and he would be there with his spear, and his wife would be on the bank over there starting the fire. So when I asked my brothers, why did you make that fire? It's not that cold. He said, no, that's to draw the fish in towards the shore so Matt could have a chance to spear them. So that's what Annie did. She kept the fire going, and sure enough, the fish would come in. You could see him here splashing over there, getting a nice big fish and sliding it along the grass and up to the bank and throwing it up on the bank. And Annie would, do the rest. Give it a club and take it out of its misery. And so he did have, he did fish for a couple hours and did have, 7 or 8 fish. And there was only 2 of them, so they couldn't eat them all. So when we helped them, they used to give us a couple of fish, which was nice. And we did a lot of help for them, traded them stuff. And they used to tell us where all the good trees were, like their fruit trees and nut trees. So we kind of exchanged, secrets, and we always helped them. Like we took them eggs and some meat, chicken and stuff if we had too much, And so they were good neighbors, and we got along with them quite well. And yeah, we used to watch them clean their fish, eh? And the old guy, he used to kind of fillet them, and he knew how to just cut around those bones, eh? It takes a lot of practice, though, but it can be done. And that was the man that could do it, eh? And they were our elders, and my dad told us, every time you get a chance, you check on them and make sure they got, kindling and wood, and get their fire going for them if they need fire in their stove. They had 2 homes, eh? One outside, and like it was just a small 1 room, probably about 16 by 12 feet. But in the wintertime, they're living in there because it was easier to heat. And their summer home didn't have no insulation in it, and it would take too much wood through the winter to heat that house, eh? So you'd be able to live in there and cook. And so they lived in that old house.
Hello.
Yeah, we used to help them quite a bit. Take some stuff.
Who is this? Who is this?
And then during the summer, in the spring, we used to go down to the river and fish for pickerel. Lots of older guys, like, young men, Everybody had docks along there. I bet you there was 20 docks. Everybody had boats, but they didn't set no nets because the water was too fast. They would just take them right out. They got 4 or 5 fish in there pulling on a net, and they just pull the whole anchor right out and rip it all up, rip the nets up, and get away. So nets really didn't work that well there. But they did a lot of fishing with bamboo poles. And all they did was put a stick across the bamboo pole where you held on to the big end, and that's where they wrapped their fishing line, and they put bait on. They used the minnows or those big fish worms, dew worms, I guess. And we used to make fire for them and keep the fire going, and they used to catch a lot of fish like that. It was good for about a month. They fishing pickerel, and everybody had their fill. Guys would fish and share all their fish, what they had, and it was a good time for everybody fishing. And after that, we used to take care of our gardens through the rest of the summer. And then in the fall time, when we went back to school, it was time to hunt squirrels. But we didn't need to take our guns. We didn't need guns. We took slingshots. And everybody had their own slingshot and 2 pocketful stones. And in the morning, on the weekend, on Saturday morning, some boys, friends of ours from the riverfront, used to come back and help us cut wood. Like in the fall time, we used to cut a cord of wood every Saturday morning. We'd go up on the top of the hill there, and we'd cut down poles of, about 5 or 6 inches in diameter, and trim them up and carry them out to home, and then we sawed them up with the sweet saw. It used to take a couple hours to cut a cord of wood. Well, there would be, 7 or 8 or 6 of us at least. And we'd pile it all up, split it. And so we were saving wood for the winter, And we used to cut lots of ash trees, white ash, because that threw lots of heat, and the oak trees, but they were heavy, those oak trees, the red oak especially. And after that, we'd go hunting in the afternoon. We'd have our lunch, sandwich, or Mom would make some fry bread and oven bread, little bowl of soup, and we'd go take the dogs. They did bring a dog with them, and we'd have a couple of dogs, and they got along all right after a while. And you could hear those dogs ahead of us, starting to bark, and sure enough, we'd get up there, catch up to them, and they'd have 1 or 2 squirrels treed, up a tree, chased them up the tree, and they'd wait for us. Then they'd sit down and watch the squirrel run on the top of the branches. We'd be shooting at them with slingshots once they stop, Sometimes it only takes 4 or 5 shots, and somebody would hit that squirrel in the head, and it would fall out of the tree. And the dog would jump on it, shake it up, knock the sense out of it. That's what killed the squirrel. Then we used to throw them in a hunting bag. We used to have hunting bags. We used an old potato sack with some twine on it, and over our shoulder we put 2 or 3 squirrels in there each, and it wouldn't be all so heavy. Then we'd go home, clean them all up. By that time it was getting about 4 o'clock. Days were getting shorter, so the boys had to go walk through the bush to get home. After that, we did, for about 3 weeks in a row, every Saturday we used to hunt squirrels. Then come along Thanksgiving in October, So then we'd go out and watch where the geese used to land in the ponds. And we'd wait there early in the afternoon, so when the geese come in to eat, that's when my brothers used to shoot for me. You have to get at least two geese per meal, and Then after that, we would also track around, see where, and watch for new deer trails. We look for the fresh tracks, the fresh issues. Then after that, we knew where to wait. And sometimes when there'd be, the other boys from the river used to come back, there'd be, 6 or 7 of us. Have 2 or 3 guys waiting, and 3 or 4 of us chasing the deer through the bush. They're chasing them up, so they run those trails, eh? We find out which way the wind is blowing and which way the deer we figured went last by the tracks, eh? And we chased them back if we had the right wind. And, somebody would get a shot at them, and hopefully they get one, sometimes 2, and that's about all we took, eh? A couple of deer, and we shared a lot of it because we didn't have no freezers then. If it was cool outside, it'd be all right for 2 or 3 days, but after that, you'd have to get rid of it, give it away to the neighbors, and people used to come around because on that Vital Street, right where that Prax is, that's where we grew up, right there. That's where our house was. And in 1952 and 53, they put a water line from the city right down Vital Street, right down to Corona, that shallow alley. When they built that plant, they needed water. So that's when they dug it up and put the water line. But then about a year after that, and my mom asked one guy one time, he says, when they come down and check the lines, the pipes, make sure everything wasn't leaking someplace, and he said, how do you get hooked on that water line? He said, all you do is got to go up to the city hall and pay $10 or $12, and they'd come down and put they'd tap the water line and put a shut-off valve for you there, and then you'd have to get the copper tubing to run into the house. Well, gee, $10 or $12, that don't cost much, but it was a lot of money in those days. And so my dad said, go ahead and get it, and we'll pay for it somehow. So every month they had a bill. The bill was only about $4 or $5, if that, $3, but it was well spent, eh? And a lot of people from the riverfront used to bring these big garbage cans, like big pails, 40-gallon pails in their cars, and we'd have a hose and they'd fill it up and take it home, eh? Because they didn't have no city water on the riverfront. And back on Tajmu, all it ran was down to the church and to the manse. The next where Morley Plain used to live, and the ministers used to live there, eh? We used to preach at the church. They lived in that house, so they had water inside, plumbing and stuff. So after that, we hunted deer, and then I talked about the fishing where we were made the fires down the river, and I kind of forgot about it, but then we put it in. But in the fall time, we used to hunt raccoons and muskrats, and that's when the hides used to be full, like they would get new fur for winter and they're growing really nice, eh? And that's when they wanted to buy them, the fur buyers. So my brothers used to set traps, and I used to go with them and see how it was all done. Sometimes we'd have a place to dig it out, and we'd have to dig the muskrat out of the bank of the ditch or creek. Well, we have nothing to do, eh? And we've seen 2 or 3 go in there. Well, let's go dig them out. We'll get them out anyway. So we'd find a hole and block it off, and find another one where it comes out someplace else, and dig that one out, eh? Whichever was shortest, that's the one we dug out and chased the muskrats down. The other way, then we hit them with a stick or a steel rod, eh? We used to poke it in the ground, like about a 1/4 inch or 3/8 rod, and it would just find that hole. You can hear it when it hits the solid ground below the hole. So we knew which way the hole was going, and we'd check up on top, see if there was any exits. So that was and then like for muskrats, they used to pay about, I don't know, $6, $7, $8, sometimes big ones, nice fur. And the fur buyers used to come right to the reserve here, because lots of boys back road here trapped them too, and dug them out. And raccoons were good to hunt. And we had dogs. Even when I grew up, we ran dogs.
How much were raccoon furs?
Raccoons, they start off in about early fall, like in end of October. You start off about $15 or $18. Then after it got a little colder and their fur grew better, and they had more, all their pelt was just full. Nice looking pelts. And so we used to get about $25, $28 for some of them. And we learned how to clean them and take all the fat off them, stretch them out. And every Friday or Saturday, you used to come over, pick up the hides, the fur buyers.
And if they didn't come over, you went across the river. If they didn't come, you went across the river.
And with the meat of the raccoons, we used to save it as long as it was cool, And we used to take them across the river down South Park, they used to call it, where the colored folks lived. They loved those raccoons. And they used to buy them up all the time. Never get stuck with them. Even when we were young teenagers, we used to take them over there. And later on, after the hunting and trapping and running the dogs and hunting, we used to hunt them at night too with the dogs. They'd treat them, and it's okay if you shoot them in the head because they don't use the head for nothing. They're just the breast of the pelt. And yep, we talked about bamboo poles, fishing lines, and
Foraging.
Pardon?
Foraging.
Oh yeah, and later on in the fall time too, when everything was all ripe and ready to fall off the trees, like the walnuts, hickory nuts, hazelnuts we used to gather, and apples. We knew where the best apples were and the best pear trees. They grew wild, like all over. Eh? Somebody would plant them and just to harvest them for themselves, I guess. And the family forgot about them, never used them anymore. But we did. We'd go down and collect lots of apples. You'd swear we'd bought them in the store. Some of those apples we used to get. And the pears. My mom used to can the pears. And so, and then we was getting mushrooms too. We used to go after mushrooms, wild mushrooms. There's nothing like it. They got altogether different taste than the ones you buy in the store today. Like the ones you buy today, they taste a little bit like mushrooms, but the real mushroom, the wild ones, they got the most flavor. And we used to get, 2 or 3 6-quart baskets, 11-quart baskets full. And we cook them all up. It'd be a good meal. We wouldn't have no steak with them, but we had mushrooms. Unless we had venison steak. And, yep. And then all the wild grapes we used to get. And all going wrong way.
Yes. This one's growing over there, right?
Elderberries.
See, where am I here?
Your elderberries.
In the trees, eh? We used to harvest lots of trees like black ash for our grandma. We knew where they were, eh? We'd mark them and save them for in the fall time when it's the best time to get them, eh? After they're all done growing and everything, they don't expand no more, so that would be the best time to harvest those black ash. And like we did get about 4 or 5 of them, and that would do her for our, right up to next season, eh? You get some big ones, about 7 or 8 inches in diameter, and they're about 6 feet long. And she used to cover them up. There used to be a little creek by her place down the river. It used to flow down to the river from the fields in behind her house. And she'd cover them in, throw an old tarp over them, and they'd stay there, all year until she wanted to use them. And then we'd go down and pound the timber off the tree, like 6 feet at a time, and about 2 inches wide. You get about 4 or 5 pieces of good bark. Not bark, but the inner side of the bark to make the splints out of for the basket making. And even some of the dyes she used to get them in the woods, in the fields. She knew where all the brightest sumac was, and in the summertime she'd get the wild mustard for the yellowness. In green, you could get it from the moss. And one needed brown, you'd get it from the walnut nuts, from the walnuts, the skin. After they're green on the outside, and then once you take that off, the nuts inside, but you keep those, I don't know what you'd call them, the outer side of the walnut, and then let it dry out, and it turns black, Then you hang them up, then just about in November, you used to squash them and get all the walnut juice out of it. It would come out black, and that's what she used to use to make brown dye. My brother used to do that stuff, when he made lots of crafts and carving, totem poles, and that's the brown where he got it from, the walnut tree, And I made some time, but not like he used. He used it all the time, And when we would harvest anything like saplings for bow and arrows, or ash trees for basket making, and any other saplings, you cut down the top of an ash tree or a white ash tree and get that crotch out of there for your slingshot handle that you would tie the rubber bands on. And we used to get our other grandpa used to bring us red rubber from the inner tubes across the river, He used to stop at these gas stations. He'd bring 2 or 3 of them sometimes and get us some more next year. And so we always had that really stretchy rubber for our slingshots, And it would project a stone quite well and straight, And we used to learn how to aim with that slingshot, and we were quite good at it, We did a lot of practicing in the summer and all the time. Put up signs and get some old bale of hay or tarp, hang it up behind our tar kits, and always kept in practice. That's something you always used, You didn't have no bullets for your rifle or anything. You'd rely on the slingshot. But they served us well. And when we harvest that stuff, like any fruit or anything, nuts or trees or saplings, we always put down tobacco all the time. Grandma made sure, she says, tobacco, Samu, she says.
Samu.
Yeah, don't forget the Samu.
Samu.
So, we always did that. Even today, I still do that. Harvest a deer or a rabbit, I always put down tobacco. It's just our way. That's the way we were taught, And even the basswood tree we used a lot, Like the inner bark, but you just pull it come off in strings about 1/2 inch wide, 1/4 inch wide. You could start with 8-foot pole and just pull that whole thing nice and slow, pull it all the way down. And that's what they used to lace up lots of stuff with, like the rim they put down around the top of the baskets. That's what they used, the basswood, the inner sides of the basswood, to tie that in. And the alum tree we used to make canoes with them, planters, And my grandma and my mom used to go to the market and sell them, Those people really like those. They've never seen nothing like that, eh? Only made planters out of an elm tree shaped like a canoe, and it would hold water, and it wouldn't rot. They would have one about 10, 12 years before it rotted. And even from the ash trees, just get handles for our tools. My dad used to make these. He put new handles on the axes, new handles on the hammer or the hoe. They wear out and break, but you still have the head left, like even on shovels, He used to make his own shovel handles. And just cut the rods. He used to get rods from at work and cut it with a hacksaw and pound it through, and then make a rivet out of it, and hold the pole in place, the handle in place. On all the items we took from Mother Earth, we always left our Sama. And that's a good way to grow up. Always say me wet, Charlton. Every morning I wake up, that's the first words that come out of my mouth. Jimmy Waits, Lord. Just that I have another day to live. Okay, that's all I'll talk about this time on this episode. Maybe later on we'll do something else. Okay, regrets.